What has mentally scarred you for life? I got pulled over for no reason whatsoever 2 days in a row. The first time the cop said my tire went over the white line, but it didn't. I had been driving fine. They pulled me out of the car, searched me, said they had probable cause to believe I had drugs in the vehicle, blah blah blah. I stood outside in the cold for like an hour while these assholes tore my car apart and found nothing. They let me go with a warning. The next day, different city, different state, I was on my way to a job interview which would have required relocation. I got pulled over for the exact same reason and had the exact same thing happen. Also, they made me late for that interview. Needless to say, I didn't get the job. But now anytime a cop is anywhere near me, I start trembling, sweating, I get hot and cold flashes, my heart starts slamming in my chest. Happens at least once or twice a week. It's been 3 years since those incidents, but my phobia of getting pulled over hasn't subsided.
That sounds really frustrating. Getting pulled over for no reason can mess with your head. It's wild how one experience can stick with you like that. You'd think after a while it would fade, but I guess not. Having that anxiety every time you see a cop is tough. It's all about trying to get past it, but sometimes those moments just stay with you. I hope it gets better for you.
In junior school, while writing a story, I made a spelling error. Spelled I, not sure why, but I did. Hey, I was only a kid. The teacher spotted it and made me stand up and explain what I'd done to the whole class. To this day, I still feel the shame of that mistake like I'd made it yesterday.
That's one of those moments that sticks with you. It's funny how a small spelling error can make you feel embarrassed for so long. I think everyone has a story like that from school where they got called out. You just wanted to write your story and then had to face the music. It's part of growing up, I guess. But yeah, it's hard to forget those moments.
My first family holiday to Florida, specifically Universal Studios. I was a little kid at the time, maybe 6 years old. It's just a little ride on a boat? Nope. It's a fucking Jaws ride. It's just a ride in an elevator? Nope. It's a fucking King Kong ride. It's just a ride in a train? Nope. It's a fucking earthquake ride. This went on the whole day. By the end, I was in tears just going on the ET ride. My parents now wonder why I have trust issues.
Sounds like a wild trip. Must have been intense for a kid. Those rides really don't hold back, especially the ones you mentioned. I get why you'd end up emotional after that. Parents probably thought they were just fun, but for you, it was a whole different game. Trust issues? Makes sense, considering every time they said, "Just a ride," it turned out to be a lot more.
I was in a treatment facility a couple years ago. They took a group of us to the beach in South Florida. The current from the ocean was stronger than usual, but we thought nothing of it. All of a sudden, the lifeguards are rushing into the water to rescue a kid who was with us and had gone under the water. 2 lifeguards bring him ashore and tried to resuscitate him. He had already drowned to death and could not be revived. I remember he was 20 years old from Illinois. His parents sent him down to treatment for a little marijuana problem. Eventually, we all wrote letters to his family with our condolences and stories about our interactions. Silver lining. His mother came to visit our facility after his death, said he was blessed to have such welcoming people who were so nice to her son. He was a bit mentally challenged. Said he wrote letters home once a week raving about his new friends.
That's a heavy story. It's wild how life can change in an instant. A beach trip meant to be a break turned into something tragic. It's sad for the kid and his family, but it's nice to hear about the support your group gave. It must have meant a lot to his mom to know he had friends there. Moments like that stick with you. Life's fragile, you know?
Kid in my high school history class used to be able to crack almost every bone in his body. Fingers, wrists, elbows, neck, back, etc. It was disgusting. So he starts his whole cracking routine as he normally does and goes to crack his neck with the over-the-head pulling motion. Right arm over the head to left side of skull, then pull. Seen him do this multiple times a day for half the school year. Only this time he pulls too hard, and somehow manages to completely fuck up the discs in his neck and caused him to be completely paralyzed for almost a year as he did intense therapy to regain his lower body functions. Never will I crack my neck again, and can't bear to watch when I see other people do it.
That's a wild story. I remember a kid in my class who could crack everything too. It was kind of a party trick, but when you think about what happened to that guy, it makes you rethink those kinds of habits. It's crazy how something so normal can go so wrong. I don't think I could watch someone crack their neck either after hearing that. Just not worth the risk.
When I was about 7, my mom told me that my grandmother has Alzheimer's disease and then explained what Alzheimer's disease does to you. She then proceeded to tell me that I will probably develop the same thing when I get older. Instant Alzheimer's phobia. To this very day, I freak out to even think about it. What's ironic is when if I get Alzheimer's, I won't even know it.
It's wild how a conversation like that can stick with you for years. Being so young and hearing about something so serious must have been rough. It seems ironic, though, that worrying about Alzheimer's could be a part of the issue itself. It's a strange cycle, thinking about memory loss while trying to remember everything. Hard not to feel anxious about it, I guess.
Coming home from work and walking into the bedroom, I shared with my then boyfriend to wake him up from a nap. Switch the light on and bend down to kiss him. His ex's head pops up from beside him. Made me instantly nauseous. I continued to have to deal with her being in my home when I wasn't for 2 more years until we finally broke up.
That sounds rough. Walking into that situation must have been a shock. It's never easy dealing with something like that, especially when it keeps happening. I can't imagine how you felt having her around all that time. It's good that you eventually moved on. You deserve better than having to share your space like that.
When I was in elementary school, my friend told me that one of his friends got stabbed in the eye with a pencil. Years later, I realized that he could made up this story, but it was too late. From that day, I have this fear that someday, something pointy will stuck in my eye. I don't know why, but I was really affected with this story. So, till this day, I can't look directly at the pointy end of things, either dull or sharp, knife, pencil, wire, or fork, without getting shiver. And every time I open a new book or magazine, I do this with extra caution, because somehow I feel like I'm going to get paper cut in the eye.
That's an interesting story. Kids can really freak each other out with wild tales. It's funny how one story can stick with you for years. I guess it's just a reminder of the power of words. Now, every time you see something pointy, it brings back that fear. It's kind of wild how that kind of stuff shapes us, even in ways we don't expect. Just goes to show how strong the imagination can be.
Getting a call that my kids, 6 and 9, were in a serious car accident. My father was driving, collision was not his fault. He didn't make them wear seatbelts when they were in the back seat. Everyone is okay now, grown up and married off, but I am fanatical that everyone wears their seatbelt no matter where they sit in the car.
It's tough hearing about accidents involving kids. I can imagine how that moment felt, worrying about their safety. It's good to hear everyone turned out okay in the end. Your dedication to seatbelt rules makes sense, especially after a close call. It's a reminder for many to always prioritize safety in the car, regardless of where someone is sitting. Sometimes, experiences shape our beliefs for the better.
I've been in 4 serious relationships from 19 to 23. The first one, I admit I should have been a better boyfriend. The next girl, I was completely smitten by her. Only girl I seriously considered marriage/forever. She cheated on me. The girl I dated afterwards also cheated on me. We also lived together, and I had the privilege of her inviting her ex over. The girl I dated last ended things with me when I had to move away by ignoring me. A few months later, she texts me how much she misses and loves me. She then stopped talking to me again afterwards and went after someone she thought was better and cooler, a club promoter. Needless to say, I don't know if I can go through another relationship, let alone handle another disappointment. Edit. I'm 26 now and haven't dated since.
Sounds like you've been through a lot. Relationships can really take a toll. It's tough to think about getting back out there after so many letdowns. Taking a break might be what you need to recharge. Focus on yourself for a bit, figure out what you really want. Sometimes, taking your time can change things for the better later on.
Disowned by my family, started college living with my then girlfriend. Her stepfather gets pissed at me for looking at porn in the house, stating that it's ruining his marriage and my then girlfriend's future career. Ran out, ended up breaking up, tried dating some other people, didn't really work out. Can't go to college because I'm struggling to support myself. Finally got a better job than minimum wage because I spent my breaks at McDonald's studying for an A+ certification, which got me a decent job repairing computers. I want to go back to college one day. I can't stop thinking about my ex-girlfriend. Having no support network is very hard too. I'm finally coming out of the dark, but damn, everything still hurts at night.
That sounds really tough. Disownment and relationship issues can really take a toll. It's good to hear you found a better job, though. Those little victories matter. The struggles with college and the memories of your ex-girlfriend are understandable. It's like carrying a weight. But realizing you want to go back is a positive sign. Just take it one step at a time. Healing isn't linear, but you seem to be on the right path.
I never wore my seatbelt before this. I always claimed it was too restricting. One day, I was at a four-way stop, and I attempted to make a right-hand turn. They were widening the road and had put the markers up, but had not started the work on that side of the road. I got T-boned by an impatient asshole who drove behind the barriers. The car was totaled. I had to crawl out of the busted window, using the gear shifter as a step. I had one bruise on my arm. I looked at the car and decided that whatever luck I had up until that point had run out, and I've used a seatbelt ever since.
It's funny how a moment can change your perspective. I used to think seatbelts were annoying too, until I got into a minor accident. I was lucky, just a scratch. But seeing the damage really hit me. After that, I never questioned wearing it again. Sometimes, it takes a wake-up call to realize what really matters. Just a small choice can make a significant difference.
This one is pathetic compared to the other. Much more serious replies here, but it's the first thing that popped into my brain, and I still involuntarily freak out every time I think of it. My mom was sitting at her computer on a four-legged wooden chair. My cat was sleeping, his body wound around the legs of the chair. My cat had a weird thing for sleeping under chairs. My mom had no idea my cat was underneath her, and she suddenly lifted her chair quite far up to shift it backwards. Had my cat not been as insanely fast as he was in getting the fuck out of there, a chair leg would have utterly impaled him. I screamed. Mom freaked out. Cat was out of there. Safe to say, I never allowed my cat to sleep under any chairs again. It's dumb, I know, but holy shit, I can't help but imagine what would have happened if my cat hadn't been that fast, and even now I have to shake involuntarily whenever I remember it. Such a close call. Do not let your cats sleep under four-legged chairs if you have a mind to lift them up to shift them about, unless you want a potential dead cat with a lot of gore.
That sounds intense. I can totally relate to those moments where everything could have gone wrong. When I was younger, my dog used to sleep under the coffee table. One time, I almost tripped over him while carrying a drink. Just thinking about it makes me cringe. Thankfully, he moved just in time. Now, I'm always careful to check under tables. It's crazy how close calls can stick with you.
When I was about 12, I went on a road trip with my best friend and her family to Kansas. I ended up falling asleep during the ride at one point, and when I woke up, looked out the window. Across the 4 lanes of traffic, there was a car leaving a gas station. It didn't matter how fast that car was going when it pulled out in front of a semi and got T-boned. The speed limit was 75, so it was dragged for a good while until it fully stopped. I've been terrified of semis ever since.
That sounds pretty intense. It's wild how a moment like that can stick with you. One minute you're just on a trip, and the next you see something shocking. I get why you'd be scared of semis after witnessing something like that. It's those unexpected moments that really change how you see things. Hope it didn't ruin road trips for you though.
This just happened 5 minutes ago. I'm visiting my sister's apartment. She goes to SIUC, and really only college kids live around here. So I'm home alone here, and someone knocks on the door. I'm not expecting any guests or anything, so I don't even get up to see who it is. So they knock again, and I'm just staring at the door waiting for them to leave. Then I hear Jesus jingling, and they open the door and walk in. I scream, and he just says, "I'm here to change your filter," and heads into the laundry room. Once he's done, he just walks out. I'm still just sitting here in shock and fear. Edit. Key's not Jesus. I don't know what Jesus jingling sounds like.
That's a wild situation. You're just chilling alone, and someone barges in unexpectedly. It has to be unsettling to hear a knock and then someone just enters. The fact that they were there to change a filter makes it less scary, but still, it's not something you expect. It'd be tough to shake off the shock after that. I'd probably be on edge for a bit too.
I was about 10, sitting in the front passenger seat of my dad's car at a red light. We're the only car in our lane. The left lane is empty. Middle of the suburbs, so traffic is steady but not heavy. A motorcycle zooms past us in the left lane and is immediately broadside by a big pickup truck. I watch his body fly off the bike and hit an oncoming car from the other lane. The bike is totally run over and gets stuck under the truck. Both drivers run out, but the motorcyclist is sitting there like a bloody doll, about 20 feet in front of our car. The entire intersection is blocked now. We're stuck looking at this nightmare. The ambulance showed up. They tried to resuscitate him for a couple minutes, but eventually they put white blanket over his entire body and loaded him into the back of the ambulance. My dad and I barely spoke the whole time. Then traffic cleared and we went home. We never talked about it again.
That sounds really intense. I can't imagine seeing something like that at such a young age. It's strange how some moments stick with you, even if you don't talk about them. Your dad probably felt a lot too, but sometimes it's easier to just move on without saying anything. That kind of thing can definitely shape how you see the world later on, even if you don't realize it at the time.
When I was 3, I got pneumonia in every lobe of my lungs, as my mother recalls it anyway. I was hospitalized for several days on 4 of antibiotics and fluids. Apparently, I kept trying to rip the 4 out, so they told my parents to leave the room, and they strapped me to a board so I couldn't rip the 4 out again. My mom said they could hear me screaming down the hall for them, because I was so scared. I'm 34, and I can't get a shot or 4 or a blood draw without having an immense panic attack. It is a debilitating phobia in many ways, since I steer clear of medical treatments that will involve needles. I've been to a therapist for over 2 years trying to work on it with no success. I had my dermatologist write me a script for a topical numbing cream to help if I have a procedure, but I'm still terrified.
That sounds really tough. It's crazy how early experiences can stick with you and shape your feelings about things later in life. I've had my own moments with needles, too, though not as extreme. I guess it just makes sense that some fears linger. It's good that you've tried therapy, but it can be a long process. I hope that topical cream helps a bit next time you need a procedure.
Feel very lucky that I haven't seen or experienced a lot of the things in this thread. Mine is very mild in comparison, but I'll never forget the time that a co-worker who I thought was my friend confronted me to tell me that she thought I was fake, nasty, and hypocritical. She quoted back things that I'd said jokingly, i.e., "You're crazy," as things she took personally, claimed she had evidence of me gossiping about her at work. To the best of my memory, I never had, and told me that she didn't want me to pretend to be her friend anymore. Never felt like I was pretending until then. It was really stunning to hear my character ripped apart to my face. And even though I felt her accusations were unfounded, it still made me question whether I'd been deluding myself into thinking of myself as a generally good person. I sometimes still wonder if she still holds such strong feelings against me, or if her perception of our relationship changed at all over the years.
It's tough when someone you thought was a friend flips the script like that. It can shake your confidence and make you rethink how you interact with others. It's strange to realize someone interpreted your words so differently. Even if the accusations weren't true, it leaves a mark. I guess it's just a reminder that everyone sees things through their own lens. Sometimes it's hard to know how others really feel about you.
Grew up with a sister that was bipolar and manic depressive according to her doctors. She and my parents would fight constantly. Screaming matches that would turn a little physical, her pushing, slapping, throwing things. So I spent all of my middle school and high school years in my room trying to avoid it all. Luckily, it never got seriously violent, but over time it just wears on you. I avoid confrontation at all costs now. I ignore issues with people because I'm scared of getting into an argument. Even seeing other people having a mild disagreement makes me nervous and gets my hear rate going up.
That sounds tough. Growing up in an environment like that can really shape how you handle conflict later on. It's understandable why you'd want to avoid confrontation. Just trying to keep the peace makes sense after all those years. It's interesting how our past experiences can stick with us and affect our reactions. Hope you find ways to feel more comfortable with disagreements over time.
Had to write a song for music class back when I was about 13-14. It was terrible, and I then realized I wasn't a good singer since it was the first time I'd sang in public since my voice broke. Now I'm a decent singer and I can actually play instruments, but every so often I'll hear a song and think, why couldn't I have written something like that and been able to sing it? And I'll imagine myself playing it in front of that class and not having my classmates laugh behind their hands at me.
I remember having to perform a poem in front of my class when I was around the same age. I was super nervous, and it didn't go well. A couple of kids snickered, and it really stuck with me. Fast forward to today, I sometimes think about how I'd handle it differently. It's funny how those moments shape you, but they can also be a bit cringy to look back on.
I learned to read when I was really young, around 2 years old. I was able to read words, but I didn't necessarily comprehend the actual meanings to the words that I was reading. One time, I read that mushrooms were poisonous, which my 2-year-old brain figured would mean instant death if you got too close. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, decided to buy me an illustrated guidebook on different kinds of mushrooms. Poisonous ones were marked with a red skull and crossbones. Needless to say, I am pretty well phobic of mushrooms. I won't touch them, refuse to eat food in which they're a part of, and feel uneasy when I'm in the supermarket or if they're in the fridge. Photos of them and stuff don't bother me, but I'll be damned if I'm ever going to handle one of those things.
That's an interesting take on childhood reading. Learning to read so early must have been cool, but it seems like that mushroom thing really stuck with you. It's funny how a little information can create such a big fear. Most kids have weird fears, but yours is kind of unique. I guess staying away from mushrooms is a safe bet, even if it's a bit extreme.
A friend of mine was driving down the highway at 75 miles per hour while driving his car. It was early 2000s, small, and kind of sporty, but I can't remember what car it was. In front of him was a pickup truck with a lab in the bed, also going 75. The dog jumps out of the truck, tumbles, and gets hit by my friend. Dog gets up and runs back to its owner's truck while my friend's car was totaled.
That sounds like a wild experience. Your friend must have been in shock after that. It's crazy how dogs seem to have a way of bouncing back. A totaled car is rough, but glad the dog was okay. I guess it shows how unpredictable things can be on the highway. Can't imagine what went through your friend's mind right after it happened. Just one of those moments that sticks with you.
Mine is similar. Age 18, driving back to New York after a spring break week in Florida. I'm on a long straight stretch of divided highway. My side is 2 lanes. I'm in the right lane, and I see a large black object in the road some distance ahead. So I shift to the left lane. As I get closer, it turns out the object is a big black dog. Just as I'm about to pass him, he leaps at our car and is clipped in the head by the right front fender at least 60 miles per hour. I check the rear view, and he's now lying still, across the lane dividing line, presumably dead. I'm shaking like a leaf. I pull off at the next exit, and just sit for about 10 minutes while the adrenaline clears from my system. I couldn't watch dog food commercials for a month.
That's a rough experience. I can imagine how shaken up you would be after hitting a dog like that. The adrenaline must have been intense. It's never easy dealing with accidents, especially involving animals. It's wild how something like that can stick with you for so long, like avoiding commercials. Sometimes, those moments really put things in perspective, making you more cautious on the road.
Small-scale version of this happened to me. About 10 police officers turned up at our house at 2 a.m. demanding to see my dad's studio. Something to do with a malicious tip-off about a non-transmitting scanner that turned out to not even work. Thankfully, my dad knew his rights and the legal situation very well. The police had no idea what they were looking for, which is, I assume, why I woke up to a policeman in my bedroom just staring at me.
That sounds like quite a night. I can imagine being startled awake by a cop in your room. It's pretty wild how things can escalate from a tip-off. Good that your dad knew his rights. It's essential in situations like that. Having cops show up at your house, especially late, would definitely get your heart racing. Glad it ended up being nothing serious.
My brain has some sort of built-in coping mechanism for this, I think. I've been divorced for about 5 years now, too, after an 8 or 9 year relationship. And I can't even imagine what my life was like when I was married to her anymore. I looked at her on Facebook the other day, and it was seriously like staring at a stranger. My brain terrifies me sometimes.
It's interesting how our minds can block out certain memories over time. I had a friend who went through a similar thing after a long relationship ended. After a few years, they started looking at old photos and felt like they were looking at someone else's life. It's kind of wild how we adapt and move on, even if it feels strange. Sometimes I wonder what parts of my past I might forget too.
A bang, a boom, a scream in the night awoke me from my sleep and gave me a fright. So I went to my parents, who I trust, only to see my mother's bust. They sat me down for a tall glass of milk and looked at me in their robes of silk. Next, they told me there would be another, my very own little baby brother.
This reminds me of the time I heard loud noises at night when I was a kid. I ran to my parents' room, scared. They calmed me down, just like in the story. Eventually, they told me I was getting a little sister soon. I went from being scared to being excited, thinking of all the adventures we'd have together. It's funny how quickly fears can turn into joy.
I was 17/18 at the time and rescued a little black lab mixed puppy that came through our clinic. It had mange and was underweight, but just the cutest little girl. I treated her mange, took her home, and was really bonding with her. Our driveway at the time was on a steep hill, and we did not have a fence, and my dad would let her out during the day. She would run under my car when I was coming home, every damn day. I always stopped and waited until I saw her run out the other side before pulling all the way in and parking. One day she ran under, and I saw her come out the other side, and I pulled forward. I heard a horrible shriek and felt a crunch under my tire. I had run over her head. I still cringe thinking about it over 20 years later. I never let a dog roam after that, either. Lesson learned.
That's a tough story. It's sad to hear how things went down with that puppy. Taking care of a pet is a responsibility, and stuff like this can happen if you're not careful. It's good that you learn from it, though. Not every situation ends up with a happy ending, but it's part of growing up and understanding the risks. At least you know better now.
I've always wondered, how do vets respond to people saying, "Thanks, man," or "Thanks for your service" when being seen in uniform? Whenever I see someone in uniform, I look at them and look away because I don't want them to think I'm giving them too much attention, but I also feel bad because then they might think I'm just ignoring them.
I get what you mean. It's kind of a tricky situation. I have buddies in uniform, and they say responses vary. Some appreciate the thanks, while others find it a bit awkward. They just want to do their job, you know? It can be hard to find the right balance in showing respect without making it weird. I usually just smile and nod if I see them. Keeps it simple.
Same here. My grandfather had Alzheimer's. By the time he died, he didn't recognize any of his children or grandchildren. I think it scares me more than any physical illness because we think of our mind as the more significant part of who we are than our body. If I'm so ill I have to have something amputated, that sucks, but I'm still going to be more or less me at the end of it. With Alzheimer's, the degradation of your mental ability means that even though you're still alive, you are hardly the same person, and that terrifies me.
I get that. Watching someone lose their memories is hard. It's like they're in there somewhere but just can't connect. It's unsettling because our identity is tied to our memories. Seeing someone you love change so drastically can really shake you. You can feel their presence, but the person you knew is fading. It's a tough thing to come to terms with, knowing they might not recognize you anymore.
This hits home. I still have trouble expressing my emotions and opinions to my current because of my ex. I found it easier to not express anything, as that minimized arguments and fighting. Then we'd fight because I didn't want to fight. I because visually emotionless and still am unless someone really tried to crack through. I hold things in a lot of the time now because somewhere mentally it feels easier to carry the burden alone than to possibly start an argument.
I get that. It's tough when past relationships shape how we deal with feelings. Sometimes, it's just easier to stay quiet than to risk a fight. Holding everything in can feel like the safer option, but it can really take a toll. It's a struggle to find that balance between expressing yourself and avoiding conflict, especially when you're still dealing with the aftermath of past experiences.
When I was 16, I got into a relationship with someone I met online. My first warning sign was that she was 35. It didn't get any better from there. 20 months and a good bit of emotional abuse later, I ended the relationship and haven't spoken with her since. It does get better. I was fortunate in that I'm very emotionally stable, though it did make me much pickier about people I consider being partners with, which has led to me only having one, short but problem-free, relationship since. The main relic is that I still say, "I'm sorry," almost reflexively, though it's much better than it was. Obviously, every situation is different, but if you want an ear to talk to about it or anything else, you're as welcome to PM me as anyone.
That's a tough experience for sure. Getting involved with someone much older can lead to imbalances that are hard to navigate. It's good to hear you're emotionally stable now and have a better sense of what you want in a partner. That reflex of saying, "I'm sorry," often can stick around for a while, but recognizing it is a step. Having someone to talk to about these things can definitely help.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.